up, Professor? My name is Martha Castillo, and this is my Week 7 final project. Something that you will see throughout all my slides is a reference, which I have attached the article or PDF that you gave us during the designated week in class, where I learned the most from. For Week 1, types of survey bias and how to avoid them was what stood out the most to me. Survey bias can significantly impact the reliability and validity of research findings. It's really important for me to understand these concepts because bias is something that unfortunately is present in most surveys, and I need to know how to navigate these. So, selection bias, response bias, and non-response bias are the most important types of biases. Selection bias occurs when participants are not representative of the target population. The best way to mitigate this is by making sure that I use random sampling techniques and have enough people in my demographics. Response bias results from participants providing inaccurate responses due to social desirability or misunderstanding questions. I feel like this is something that everybody has kind of been a part of. I personally, when I took surveys in high school for development, I didn't really always answer truthfully just because I wasn't sure if it was anonymous or not, and I was a bit shy. Non-response bias arises when there's a difference between respondents and non-respondents. You can reduce this by minimizing response rates through incentives and clear communication. I did not realize how much of an issue non-response bias was until I took this class. Something that I would do going forward in my research studies would be observe an incentive like a gift card and make sure that all my questions are concise as much as they can be and very clear what I want them to answer. Week 2. Creating inclusive surveys. I did not realize that surveys could be non-inclusive, so this was a very interesting and eye-opening week for me. So it's imperative to assign surveys that are inclusive to ensure that all participants feel respected and represented, specifically with language and cultural sensitivity, accessibility, and diverse representation. For language and culture sensitivity, that's mostly designated towards sensitive topics like gender and sex, which could be fluid in this day and age. Accessibility is also very important. I wouldn't want anybody to not be able to take my surveys just because they have a disability. And diverse representation, in my opinion, there is really no true reliability or validity without ensuring that studies can be generalized to diverse groups, depending on the study, of course. Week 4. I think week 4 was the most daunting Jamovi tutorial. The PDF that the I'll be honest. I'm I'm sorry. You can hear my fiance laughing in the back. I am not good with Jamovi. Especially in Rome where I could barely get Jamovi to function. That was an ordeal, but boy, Jamovi. So data import. I think you'd be surprised how long it took me to figure out how to open a file in Jamovi. This is like my 13th attempt. I'm sorry if this is the one that you have to see. Anyways, descriptive statistics, they calculate measures such as mean, median, and standard deviation. This was an inferential statistics where you perform t-tests, ANOVAs, and regression analysis. For some reason, this was much easier than opening the first data set into Jamovi. You were right in that phone call we had. I do like this more than SPSS, and I think if I can, I will use this for my dissertation. Can can you stop laughing? I'm gonna turn this in. You're being awful right now. My fiance's a statistician, and he is beyond himself. That Jamovi was that hard for me to learn. Anyways, oh, sorry. General Self-Efficacy Scale, the GSC. So this one stood out to me because of the type of dissertation study that I was speaking about in my journals. Job satisfaction is something that I'm very interested about. And as a first-time teacher, which I am for middle school, kids can be brutal. I have to admit that my self-confidence isn't always the best. So depending on what day you give me the survey, my answers might reflect that. So the three key points of the GSC scale is administration, scoring, and interpretation. So to administer the GSC, assess participants' perceived self-efficacy across different domains. Score responses range between low to high, and you can interpret results to understand how self-efficacy influences behavior. I think this is a great scale, and I will be looking into how to implement this in my studies. So thank you. Week 6. Interpreting and reporting Cronbach's alpha reliability coefficient for Likert type scales. I apologize if I'm butchering that. Cronbach's. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Anyways, Cronbach's alpha assesses the internal consistency reliability of Likert type scales item. Something that I wasn't too familiar with, and now I am, so thank you again. The three most important points for this type of scale is calculations, interpretation, and reporting, at least to me. So calculating Cronbach's alpha using statistical software to assess the extent of which items the scale measures the same construct. That's the most important part. You can either use Jamovi or SPSS, at least that I'm aware. And depending on the software you're using, it's not too hard, so that's great. So the ranges are usually from 0 to 1. Higher values indicate a greater internal consistency. And to report Cronbach's alpha's findings in research papers is necessary to demonstrate the reliability of survey instruments used in studies. I will need more help with Cronbach's alpha, but I think that it is a great. I don't even know what I'm saying. Thank you. Hello, Professor. My name is Martha Castillo, and this is my Week 7 final project. Something that you'll see across my slides is a reference at the bottom of the page. I have included all the articles or PDFs that I used during this week, which you provided that stood out the best for me. For week 1, that would be types of survey bias and how to avoid them. So, survey bias can significantly impact the reliability and validity of research findings. I've selected the three most important types of biases: selection bias, response bias, and non-response bias. Selection bias is when participants are not representative of the target population. The best way to mitigate this is by using a random sampling technique. Response bias, I personally feel like everybody has experienced at one point or the other, is where respondents don't answer truthfully because they either don't understand the question correctly or because they do not want to answer something that they might be ashamed of. For example, I personally in high school remember my classmates not answering very truthfully to surveys that spoke about alcohol and drug use just because they were embarrassed. So that would be an example of response bias. The best way to mitigate this is to ensure the participants know that all their answers are anonymous and to ensure that all my surveys are written clearly and concisely. Non-response bias arises when there are differences between respondents and non-respondents, and the best way to maximize response rates is through incentives and clear communication. I actually did not know that a non-response bias is going to be as big as it was, so it was very informative for me. Week 2, creating inclusive surveys. I personally was not aware that surveys could be non-inclusive, so week 2 was very interesting and innovative for me. So it's imperative to design surveys that are inclusive to ensure that participants feel respected and represented. The three most important areas are language and cultural sensitivity, accessibility, and diverse representation. I did not realize that language could be so specific in surveys. to ensure that there is inclusivity. One way to do this is to ensure that you use inclusive language specifically in the areas of sex and gender, which I've noticed could be a bit more fluid and less linear than other survey questions. Accessibility is to mainly ensure that those who are disabled are able to take my survey, and I make specific accommodations as necessary. And inferential statistics, oh, I'm sorry. And diverse representation is to include diverse demographic groups in surveys designed to capture varied perspectives and experiences, which I think is imperative for every survey to make sure that you have a diverse group to ensure validity and reliability. Week 4, Jamovi tutorial. I think this was the hardest week for me, going from SPSS to Jamovi. So Jamovi is a user-friendly statistical software used for data analysis. You attach the PDF first, which was very it was very detailed and very helpful. I'll be honest. I had a hard time with Jamovi, especially in Rome, where it was very slow to load. It took me an embarrassingly long time to import the data set and open it up. But now that I've got the hang of it, I personally like it more than SPSS. So thank you. So the three most important things that I learned from Jamovi are data import, descriptive statistics, and inferential statistics. So data import, how to import data sets into Jamovi. I have another class where I use SPSS. I've been importing the data from SPSS to Jamovi and using Jamovi to answer the questions. So that's an example of that. Descriptive statistics is how to calculate mean, median, and standard deviation in Jamovi. And inferential statistics is t-tests and ANOVAs in Jamovi, which are all included in the PDF that you sent, and we've been practicing in our coursework. Week 5, the general self-efficacy scale. So this was imperative for me to look deeper into because of the type of research that I'm into. I think job satisfaction goes hand in hand with the general self-efficacy scale, specifically in the theme of being a middle school teacher. I personally am a middle school teacher, and I feel like depending on the day, my self-confidence and my perception of my self-efficacy might be either higher or lower, and that could impact the way that I answer a survey. So having this type of skill would really ensure that the data and the responses are accurate. So the three most important part of the general self-efficacy scale is administration, scoring, and interpretation. This measures an individual's belief and their ability to achieve goals in various situations. And their levels of self-efficacy are from low to high, and this helps researchers influence behaviors and outcomes in specific contexts, like teaching. Week 6, interpreting and reporting Krobak's alpha reliability coefficient for Likert type scale. Krobak's alpha assesses the internal consistency reliability of Likert type scales. Calculation of Krobak's alpha is used with statistical software. This was a bit challenging for me, but I feel like I feel more confident about doing this. The interpretation of the scale is that it goes from 0 to 1, and higher values indicate greater internal consistency. And we've gone over a couple of articles that have Krobak alpha findings in the research paper, which demonstrates the reliability of survey instruments used in studies. And this is something that I will be looking more into and trying to be more proficient in statistics. That's what I struggle the most with, and I want to ensure that by the time my dissertation comes around, I am more proficient. This is the end of my video. Thank you so much for sticking with me, and I hope you like it. Have a wonderful day.